Gengar has always existed in that strange space between the familiar and the uncanny, a creature everyone recognizes instantly, yet still struggles to fully understand. There's something about its presence that feels older than the games themselves, as if Gengar wasn't created for the world of Pokemon, but slipped into it from some shadowy corner that existed long before. Even though it's classified as a ghost and poison type, those labels barely scratch the surface of what Gengar represents. It is one of the few Pokemon that feels like a character in every region's culture, a legend that follows humanity like a mischievous echo. People grow up hearing stories about it, seeing it in posters, battling it in games, and yet it always maintains that mysterious grin, the kind of grin that hints it knows things you don't. Part of Gengar's enduring fascination comes from how it blurs the line between tangible and intangible. It has a physical body, one capable of striking, biting, and shaping real-world energy into attacks, yet it can also melt into shadows, phase through objects, and appear in places no living creature should logically reach. Trainers who encounter Gengar often describe a sudden drop in temperature, followed by a flicker of movement just outside their peripheral vision. This is consistent enough, across reports, that researchers believe Gengar manipulates light and heat around itself, reducing visible clarity and creating momentary illusions that make it seem as though it's teleporting. But whether this phenomenon is biological, supernatural, or something in between remains unknown. The Pokédex has always described Gengar as a shadow Pokémon, but not in the literal typing sense. Instead, the term implies that Gengar behaves like a living shadow, something that exists in proximity to life, reflecting it, distorting it, and sometimes playfully mocking it. Some legends claim that Gengar forms when a mischievous shadow gains a will of its own. Others insist Gengar is the evolved form of a spirit that became too attached to the world of the living. While none of these ideas can be proven, they reveal how deeply Gengar has embedded itself into culture. Everyone has a theory, and every theory says something different. Its design is deceptively simple: a round body, sharp grin, pointed ears, and spiky fur that looks like it's constantly standing upright. But simplicity is exactly what makes Gengar so effective. The shape is readable from any angle, iconic at a glance, and unmistakably tied to the ghostly mischievousness that defines it. When Pokemon designers created Gengar back in Generation 1, they intended it to evoke the feeling of a classic cartoon ghost mixed with the energy of a trickster spirit. Over time, that foundation evolved into something far richer as players projected their own lore and experiences onto Gengar. In battle, Gengar stands out not just for its power, but for the speed and unpredictability it brings to every situation. Even in the earliest games, Gengar was one of the fastest ghost types available, able to strike before opponents could react. Its special attack stat made moves like Shadow Ball and Sludge Bomb devastating, while its ghost typing allowed it to slip through normal and fighting type moves entirely. Trainers quickly learned that battling Gengar required not only speed, but caution. It always seemed to stay one step ahead, a habit that feels fitting for a Pokemon modeled after shadows. The ghostly grin on its face carries layers of interpretation. At first glance, it appears playful, like Gengar is enjoying a harmless joke only it understands. But depending on the context, that grin can feel eerie, unsettling, or strangely comforting. In ghost stories told around campfires across multiple regions, Gengar appears as a trickster who teases travelers lost in the dark, leading them to safety at the last moment. But in more sinister tales, Gengar plays pranks that go further than intended, turning harmless mischief into frightening encounters. The duality of its behavior, Playful yet unpredictable, has kept Gengar's reputation as one of the most enigmatic Pokemon alive. Gengar's relationship with Haunter and Ghastly is equally fascinating. While the evolutionary line shares core characteristics related to gaseous bodies and ghostly movement, Gengar feels more fully realized, less of a drifting apparition and more of a tangible entity. Researchers believe that the process of evolution condenses the unstable form of Haunter into something firmer and more material. Gengar still behaves like a ghost, but its body is solid enough to interact with the physical world more deliberately. This dual state may explain why Gengar is capable of feats, like leaving its own shadow behind, or merging with other shadows entirely. The bond between Gengar and certain trainers often becomes unusually strong. Unlike many ghost types that remain aloof or moody, Gengar frequently displays loyalty and humor toward those it trusts. Trainers who grow close to Gengar describe it as a companion who communicates through pranks, harmless illusions, invisible taps on the shoulder, objects moved when no one is looking. These behaviors mimic the personality traits Gengar is known for: mischievous but affectionate, playful but deeply observant. When Gengar chooses a trainer, it chooses fully, forming a connection that blends companionship with an almost supernatural sense of partnership. One of the most intriguing aspects of Gengar is its ability to hide in shadows so effectively that it becomes nearly invisible. Unlike other ghost types that fade or phase through objects, Gengar can manipulate its shape to match the contours of surrounding darkness, turning itself into a flat silhouette indistinguishable from the shadows it blends into. This ability is more than camouflage. It is a tactical advantage. Gengar can strike from the darkest corners of rooms, ambush opponents in battle, and remain unseen even in brightly lit environments by clinging to the smallest patches of shade. Its Mega Evolution form expands on this ability dramatically. Mega Gengar appears as though it has fused with the very floor beneath it, partially emerging from a swirling shadow portal. Its body becomes more angular and its grin more intense, while its third eye opens fully, radiating with eerie energy. Many scholars interpret the third eye as a symbol of heightened awareness. Mega Gengar sees not just the physical world, but the intentions, fears, and emotions of those around it. This form suggests that Mega Gengar is not only stronger, but more perceptive, almost omniscient in the way it reads its environment. Some even theorize that Mega Gengar's increased power comes from a deeper connection to the afterlife, though this remains unconfirmed. Shiny Gengar, with its pale white coloration, looks like a ghost in the most literal sense, a translucent, spectral figure that resembles the classic shape of a cartoon phantom. The white body, paired with the glowing eyes, makes Shiny Gengar feel like it stepped out of a nightmare or a haunted painting, drifting through fog with an almost angelic eeriness. Interestingly, Shiny Mega Gengar amplifies this effect dramatically. Its entire body becomes bright white with piercing yellow and pink highlights, glowing like a lantern made from ghostly energy. Many players consider Shiny Mega Gengar one of the most striking shiny forms in the entire franchise, and for good reason. There is nothing else quite like it. Gengar's lore evolves with each region. In Johto, it appears in haunted towers and abandoned homes, acting as a guardian of spaces tied to memory. In Sinnoh, it lurks in old mansions that seem untouched by time, appearing to those who enter with a mix of amusement and curiosity. In Alola, Gengar's Z-move animations emphasize its chaotic nature, showing it pulling opponents into an alternate dimension through a giant shadowy grin. Through each generation, Gengar adapts to its surroundings, becoming a reflection of the fears and superstitions of the culture it inhabits. Its role in the anime has also shaped how people see it. Episodes featuring Gengar often blend humor with mystery, showing it as both a prankster and a protector. Some portrayals depict Gengar causing harmless scares for fun, while others show it forming bonds with humans that run remarkably deep. One Gengar even became a main member of a champion's team, demonstrating the incredible strength it can achieve when its spirit is focused and its loyalty earned. These portrayals reinforce that Gengar is not defined by fear or danger, it is defined by complexity. What makes Gengar truly unforgettable is the way it blends charm with the supernatural. It is a ghost that laughs, grins, and plays. It is a shadow that thinks, plans, and interacts with the world in ways no other Pokemon can. It is a creature that seems to enjoy its own mystery, slipping between worlds with a mischievous confidence that has made it a fan favorite for decades. Every generation of players finds something new to love about it, whether it's its power in battle, its spooky personality, or the eerie beauty of its shiny form. And so, as the world sleeps, Gengar continues to drift through dimly lit city streets and quiet forests, appearing only when it wants to be seen. Its silhouette flickers in distant alleyways, its grin glowing faintly in the dark. It watches, listens, and sometimes plays a trick or two before disappearing into the shadows again. Not out of malice, but because that is simply who Gengar is, a guardian of mischief, a playful phantom, and one of the most iconic Pokemon to ever drift between light and darkness. Gengar's nature has always raised the question of what it means for a Pokemon to be a ghost. Unlike spirits described in folklore, Gengar has a beating heart, reactive muscle fibers, and a physical presence that can strike and be struck. Yet at the same time, it can phase through walls, vanish into shadows, and appear where it shouldn't logically fit. Researchers often struggle to categorize it, labeling it as a dual-state entity that exists partially in the physical world and partially in another dimension. This duality is likely why Gengar can mimic shapes and distort its body during attacks, stretching into impossible forms with fluid movement that seems to disregard the constraints of bone or muscle. This strange biology extends to Gengar's ability to absorb and release heat. Reports consistently mention a temperature drop when Gengar appears, not extreme enough to harm, but enough to cause a chill that travels over the skin like the brushing of a cold fingertip. This effect is more than just an eerie aesthetic. Scientists believe Gengar draws thermal energy from the surrounding environment to power certain ghostly abilities, storing it like a battery. The air grows cold because Gengar is feeding on the ambient warmth, converting it into ghost-type energy. When Gengar uses moves like Shadow Ball or Hex, that energy is released in concentrated form, creating attacks that feel less like physical force and more like focused, negative emotion brought to life. Gengar's shadow is one of its most mysterious features. Unlike the natural shadow cast by most Pokemon, Gengar's behaves almost independently, stretching or shrinking regardless of nearby light sources. Trainers have reported seeing Gengar's shadow detach itself slightly, flickering as if alive. While it never fully separates from Gengar in its normal form, this unusual shadow has led to theories about Gengar's origin. One of the oldest legends claims that Gengar is a living shadow that gained consciousness. Another suggests that a shadow left behind by a human or Pokemon can transform into Gengar when exposed to strong spiritual energy. None of these theories are scientifically backed, but they persist because even the most controlled experiments cannot fully explain the behavior of Gengar's silhouette. The Pokédex once described Gengar as a Pokemon that occasionally pretends to be someone's shadow, quietly following them until the moment it decides to reveal itself. This behavior has inspired both spooky stories and playful myths. Some say that if you walk alone at night and feel your shadow moving out of sync with your body, a Gengar may be nearby. Others insist that Gengar imitates shadows not to frighten people, but to keep them company in the dark, staying close enough to observe, but far enough to avoid detection. In some regions, children leave offerings of candy near dark corners of their room, believing Gengar will protect them from nightmares in exchange for the treat. Whether Gengar accepts these offerings or simply enjoys the superstition remains unknown. Despite its ghostly appearance, Gengar is surprisingly expressive. It communicates through small shifts in posture, subtle changes in the angle of its grin, and the brightness of its eyes. When amused, its grin widens into a mischievous curve. When curious, its eyes narrow slightly, as if analyzing what stands before it. When loyal or affectionate toward a trainer, Gengar often floats close and nudges them playfully, leaving invisible fingerprints of cold that linger like mist. This range of behavior proves that Gengar is far from emotionless. It simply expresses itself differently from most Pokémon. Gengar's intelligence is another defining trait. It is capable of complex pranks that require planning and situational awareness. It can lure opponents into traps using illusions, creating false sounds or flickering lights to mislead them. In certain accounts, Gengar has been seen rearranging objects in abandoned buildings to create obstacle courses for curious explorers, only to watch from the shadows as they navigate through the space. This behavior highlights how Gengar views the world not as something to be feared or avoided, but as a playground of endless possibilities. Its trickster personality makes it unpredictable, but also creative, clever, and deeply aware of its surroundings. In battle, Gengar capitalizes on this intelligence. It rarely charges head-on, preferring to confuse, misdirect, and outmaneuver its opponent. It uses its speed to dart in and out of view, striking from unexpected angles. Moves like Confuse Ray, Hypnosis, and Nightmare reflect Gengar's preference for disrupting the opponent's rhythm rather than overpowering them directly. Even offensive moves like Shadow Ball are often used strategically. Gengar attacks from behind, below, or above, making the source of the attack difficult to anticipate. Trainers who master Gengar learn to embrace this playstyle, trusting their partner's ability to think fluidly and respond to chaos with controlled mischief. Gengar's presence in haunted locations is so common across regions that it has become a universal symbol of ghostly activity. In Johto, it roams the burned tower, the remnants of a tragedy steeped in history. In Sinnoh, it is drawn to the old chateau, a mansion filled with paranormal rumors. In Kanto, it has been spotted in Lavender Tower, a place where lost souls gather. Despite appearing in these somber environments, Gengar itself is rarely malicious. Instead, it behaves like a caretaker of forgotten places, a guardian of memories preserved in dusty hallways and creaking floors. It watches closely, but rarely interferes, becoming a silent witness to history that has faded into shadow. One of the most interesting traits of Gengar is its ability to imitate human voices. This imitation is not perfect, but it is convincing enough to startle people from time to time. Some trainers tell stories of hearing their own name whispered softly behind them, only to turn and find Gengar floating with a smug grin. Others claim Gengar mimics laughter, footsteps, or distant conversations, using these sounds to lead curious humans deeper into dark environments. While this might seem frightening, most accounts frame Gengar's behavior as playful rather than predatory. It enjoys harmless scares, not causing real harm. Shiny Gengar's ghostly white coloration adds a layer of symbolism to the species. While normal Gengar feels like a spirit that thrives in darkness, Shiny Gengar resembles a restless apparition wandering through moonlit fog. Trainers often describe it as embodying the pure ghost aesthetic, bright, ethereal, and hauntingly beautiful. The pale hue makes its grin and eyes stand out even more, giving it an almost doll-like quality that is both eerie and captivating. Mega Shiny Gengar amplifies this aesthetic into something breathtaking, turning the Pokemon into a glowing spirit that looks like it belongs in a world of pure energy. Gengar's physiology suggests it may contain gaseous elements similar to neon or argon, which could explain its faint glow in low-light environments. Its body fluctuates subtly, vibrating at a frequency just below what humans can perceive. Trainers sensitive to energy often describe a humming sensation when Gengar moves past them, not a sound, but a vibration that feels like something brushing against their skin. This may be the ghost-type equivalent of a biological signature, similar to how electric types release static or fire types radiate heat. Because Gengar exists partially in another dimension, it may perceive time differently from humans. Some legends imply that Gengar can remember events that happened centuries ago, while others claim it can interact with echoes of memories stored within old buildings. Whether these abilities are supernatural or simply advanced forms of perception remains unclear. But the idea that Gengar remembers places long after people have forgotten them has inspired countless folk stories about haunted environments echoing with emotional energy from the past. The bond between Gengar and certain trainers has been highlighted in many forms of media, showing that even a mischievous ghost can develop deep loyalty. When Gengar chooses someone, it displays a playful protectiveness, helping them through tough battles, teasing them in moments of stress to lighten their mood, and standing between them and danger when needed. In the anime, Gengar's personality varies from episode to episode, but the core traits remain the same: humor, heart, and a sense of chaotic charm. The fact that it can shift from frightening to adorable within a single scene is part of what makes it so iconic. Historically, Gengar was one of the first Pokemon designed with a strong thematic contrast. Where many early designs were rooted in animals, objects, or simple elemental concepts, Gengar represented the unknown, a physical manifestation of shadows and mischief. Its design has remained virtually unchanged across all generations, a testament to its timeless appeal. With minimal alterations needed, Gengar stands as one of the most instantly recognizable silhouettes in gaming history. Even outside of battle, Gengar plays a meaningful role in the world. Some trainers believe that Gengar helps guide lost spirits toward the afterlife. Others claim it keeps people company when they are lonely, appearing in darkened rooms to remind them they're not truly alone. And in certain regions, Gengar is seen as a symbol of overcoming fear, a reminder that even the scariest things can become allies once we understand them. Wherever Gengar appears, the air shifts subtly, the shadows deepen slightly, and the feeling of being watched becomes strangely comforting. It grins not because it enjoys fear, but because it revels in the mystery of being neither fully seen nor fully understood. Gengar exists in that liminal space between light and dark, between laughter and fright, between the known world and the one just beyond the edge of perception. And for many, that is exactly why it remains one of the most beloved Pokemon ever created. Gengar's relationship with darkness is more nuanced than most people realize. While it thrives in shadows and becomes especially active at night, darkness is not what empowers it. It simply gives Gengar more space to move unseen. Light doesn't weaken Gengar, nor does it hinder its abilities. What it changes is the environment around Gengar, revealing it to those who might otherwise overlook the ghost drifting silently in dim hallways or alley corners. If anything, Gengar adapts to both bright and dark spaces with the same ease, altering its behavior depending on what will be most amusing or advantageous in the moment. For example, in brightly lit cities, Gengar often hides in reflective surfaces. Trainers have reported seeing Gengar's grin in windows, vending machine glass, and even stainless steel appliances. Most of the time, the reflection vanishes as soon as someone takes a second look, replaced with nothing but their own image staring back. Researchers believe Gengar uses a type of ghostly light manipulation to cast illusory reflections, a trick that likely evolved as a form of safety or camouflage. Over time, of course, it became another tool for mischief. Gengar's ability to phase through objects is legendary across regions, but what's interesting is how selective this phasing seems to be. It cannot simply pass through anything at will. Instead, the process appears tied to its emotional concentration. When calm or unfocused, Gengar's body behaves closer to solid matter. When it becomes excited, startled, or determined to escape, its molecular state shifts into something intangible, allowing it to move through barriers as though they were smoke. This suggests that the ghost-type state is not constant, but fluctuates based on Gengar's internal energy and mood, a trait that sets it apart from many other ghostly Pokémon. One of the earliest mysteries surrounding Gengar involves the idea that it was once tied to Clefable due to similarities in silhouette. While this theory originated from fans noticing coincidental design parallels, it became so widespread that it helped shape fan interpretations of Gengar for decades. The truth, of course, is simpler. Gengar's shape was chosen for readability, a round, simple design that could be rendered clearly on early hardware. But the fact that it inspired so many theories shows how naturally mysterious and symbolic the Pokémon is. Gengar feels like it should have a deeper origin story, whether or not the games explicitly give it one. In many regions, Gengar is associated with light-hearted superstition. Some believe that if Gengar appears in your dream, it means someone you love is missing you. Others think that seeing a Gengar's grin at night is a sign of impending good luck, a modern reinterpretation of older, spookier stories. There are towns where children leave small trinkets for Gengar near their windowsills, hoping it will keep them safe during thunderstorms. And in a few rural areas, residents claim that Gengar wards off truly malevolent spirits, chasing them back into the shadows where they belong. This paints Gengar not as a creature of fear, but as a ghostly companion that protects in its own mischievous way. The role of Gengar in gym battles and competitive environments cannot be overstated. It has been one of the strongest special attackers in multiple generations, boasting powerful moves and incredible speed. In its prime, Gengar was considered one of the most dangerous Pokémon in high-level battles. Trainers would build entire teams specifically to counter it, trying to anticipate its strategies. Even in more balanced generations, Gengar remains a beloved and frequently used Pokémon due to its versatility, unpredictability, and sheer personality. Few Pokémon can strike with the same mix of mischief and menace, but Gengar's strength is not limited to its stats. Its strategic mind makes it formidable. It observes opponents closely, adapting to their weaknesses. It can bait attacks by slipping partially into the ground, leaving enemies confused about where to strike. It can create faint illusions, flickers of movement, shadowy after images that distract attackers long enough for Gengar to strike from another angle. This cognitive sharpness is part of what makes Gengar such a compelling creature. It behaves less like a beast and more like an intelligent spirit with a sense of humor and a talent for reading emotions. The bond Gengar forms with trainers often deepens with time. Those who raise Gengar from a ghastly tend to develop a unique understanding of its moods. They learn how to interpret its grin when it's genuinely amused, when it's planning a trick, when it's curious, or when it's quietly concerned. Some trainers describe feeling a cold pressure on their hand when Gengar wants attention, as if a ghostly weight were resting lightly against them. Others claim Gengar tries to cheer them up when they're sad by creating silly illusions, shadow puppets, floating lights, or tiny ghostly shapes that dance near their feet. These small acts reveal how affectionate Gengar can be beneath its spooky exterior. Gengar's relationship with the moon is another point of fascination. It appears particularly active on nights with heavy fog or during full moons when shadows grow deeper and the air becomes still. While ghost-type energy is not directly tied to lunar cycles, Gengar seems to enjoy these nights, slipping between pockets of darkness with heightened enthusiasm. In folklore, people often associated Gengar with the moon because its grin and eyes glow faintly against pale moonlight, giving it a surreal, otherworldly appearance. These nights gave rise to stories of moonlit pranksters that spirited away fear from children by playing tricks on their nightmares. In certain abandoned locations, Gengar acts almost like a curator of forgotten memories. Old mansions, derelict ships, and ancient ruins frequently house Gengar populations. These are not random dwellings, they seem to be drawn to places where emotional energy lingers. If a building once held laughter, sadness, or significant events, Gengar may appear to maintain the atmosphere, causing lights to flicker or objects to move as though the past were replaying itself. While this behavior may unsettle newcomers, Gengar rarely does anything harmful. It simply preserves the remnants of emotion stored within the walls. Some researchers believe Gengar can sense when someone is deeply lonely. Reports from trainers living in isolated areas describe Gengar appearing during quiet evenings, flickering into existence as though responding to an unseen call. These accounts often portray Gengar as a comforting presence rather than a frightening one. It sits quietly nearby, its body humming faintly, sometimes mimicking the person's posture like a silent companion. It doesn't speak, doesn't demand attention, it simply stays until the loneliness fades. While scientific proof is limited, the consistency of these stories suggests that Gengar may be far more emotionally perceptive than originally believed. Gengar's connection to the afterlife remains one of its greatest mysteries. Some Pokédex entries imply it may interact with spirits, while others lean more into the idea of Gengar being a spirit itself. There are even accounts of Gengar guiding wandering souls, escorting them through dark forests or quiet mountains. These tales present Gengar not as a harbinger of fear, but as a caretaker of those caught between worlds. The truth likely lies somewhere in the middle. Gengar may not be a traditional guardian of spirits, but its keen awareness of emotional energy could give it insight into beings that most Pokémon cannot perceive. The humor that defines Gengar is often what confuses people the most. Why would a ghost behave like a prankster? Why would a creature associated with fear prefer laughter over chaos? The answer may lie in Gengar's nature as a ghost made partly from a living shadow. Shadows mimic their owners, and people often face their fears with humor, turning terror into something they can handle. By adopting this behavior, Gengar might simply be reflecting the emotional patterns of the humans and Pokémon around it. It is a mirror of the world's fears and joys, expressing them in exaggerated, playful ways. Its grin is the perfect symbol of that balance. It's a smile that can be spooky or comforting, depending on the moment. It can terrify or amuse. It can unsettle or empower. That duality is exactly why Gengar remains one of the most beloved Pokémon ever created. It embodies fear without cruelty, darkness without despair, and mystery without malice. As night settles across cities and forests, Gengar often emerges from hidden corners, blending into the edges of light. It watches silently, its grin glowing faintly like a mischievous star. It might cause a door to creak, shuffle a stack of papers, or create a tiny illusion just to see a reaction. And when the moment passes, it slips back into the shadows again, leaving behind a whisper of cold air and a lingering feeling that something playful, intelligent, and otherworldly had been nearby. To those who understand Gengar, these moments are not frightening. They're comforting reminders that even in the darkest corners, something is watching over them with a grin, a laugh, and an unseen hand ready to turn fear into curiosity. Gengar's existence has always been tied to places where the boundary between the living world and the unseen one feels thinnest. It gravitates toward old structures, quiet forests, fog-covered streets, and places where silence carries a certain weight. These areas contain emotional residue memories that linger in the air like dust, and Gengar seems drawn to that energy the way fire types seek warmth. These echoes of emotion, whether sorrow, joy, fear, or nostalgia, are like signals calling to Gengar. It doesn't necessarily feed on them, but it interacts with them in ways no other Pokémon does, almost as if it can listen to the feelings those places once held. When Gengar encounters these echoes, it behaves almost like a curator of forgotten stories. In abandoned buildings, lights flicker not due to faulty wiring, but because Gengar recreates the atmosphere that once defined the space. In ruined towers, where people once gathered, Gengar may cause faint footsteps or distant laughter to echo just long enough to make visitors pause. None of this is malicious. Gengar isn't trying to frighten or deceive. Instead, it almost seems to honor these remnants of the past by giving them temporary life again. For some trainers, this lends old ruins a strange comfort, a feeling that memories aren't lost, only sleeping. Gengar's behavior shifts subtly depending on who enters its space. If a confident trainer arrives with a strong team, Gengar becomes mischievous and bold, drifting close, circling them, and sometimes passing through their shadow to test their reaction. But if a frightened or uncertain trainer steps into the room, Gengar softens its presence. It floats at a distance, its grin smaller, and its movements slower. Some researchers believe Gengar can sense emotional vulnerability and deliberately avoids scaring those who are not prepared for its tricks. It is not a predator, it's an interpreter of emotion, adjusting its behavior the way a performer adjusts tone for the audience. One of the most uncanny things about Gengar is how it moves when no one is watching. Researchers who use specialized cameras in haunted locations discovered Gengar drifting in unusual patterns, looping, spiraling, or moving diagonally across the floor like a shadow responding to some unseen current. It doesn't always travel in straight lines. Sometimes it drifts against gravity, hovering upside down near ceilings with slow, methodical movements. These patterns don't seem random. Instead, they resemble scanning motions, as if Gengar is reading the room's atmosphere or mapping emotional signatures. Whether this behavior has a functional purpose or is simply something Gengar enjoys remains a mystery. The way Gengar interacts with other ghost types further highlights its complexity. Ghastly and Haunter treat it with remarkable respect, often drifting behind it or watching it closely as if seeking guidance. Other ghost types, like Banette or Mismagius, respond to Gengar with a mix of curiosity and caution. Even powerful spirits like Dusknoir acknowledge Gengar's presence by altering their behavior slightly, giving it space or shifting their attention its way. This suggests Gengar holds an unspoken authority in the ghostly ecosystem, not by dominance, but by reputation. It embodies the essence of a ghost-type Pokémon more completely than any other species, making it a natural point of reference for spectral creatures. Despite its ghostly nature, Gengar forms deeper bonds with humans than many would expect. Some trainers who've lived with Gengar for years describe it as a surprisingly affectionate companion, not in the traditional cuddly sense, but in the quiet, subtle ways that ghosts express care. When a trainer is sick, Gengar often stays close, humming softly as if trying to soothe them. When someone feels lonely, Gengar might appear without being summoned, drifting by the person's side like a silent guardian. And when danger approaches, Gengar becomes fiercely protective, its grin sharpening and its eyes glowing with intense focus. These behaviors show that Gengar's playful mischief hides a core of loyalty stronger than many expect. In battle, Gengar's mind shines just as much as its moveset. It has an uncanny ability to predict attacks before they happen. Trainers who fought Gengar report that it often dodges before they even finish calling a move. Some attribute this to keen observation. Others believe Gengar can sense small shifts in intention, reacting to an opponent's body language, aura, or emotional energy. While scientific proof is lacking, the consistency of these reports suggests there may be truth behind the idea that Gengar fights not just with speed, but intuition. Gengar's ability to manipulate shadows is one of its most defining traits. While most creatures cast shadows dictated by light, Gengar can reshape the one it controls. It can flatten itself into the ground, stretch its form to appear larger, or compress it to appear smaller. Some trainers report seeing Gengar's shadow wag its spikes or flick its tail-like extensions, even when Gengar itself is perfectly still. This indicates the shadow may function as a secondary organ, a part of Gengar's consciousness capable of independent motion when needed. Under stressful or high-energy conditions, Gengar's shadow becomes even more active, flickering rapidly or extending across surfaces like spilled ink. Scientists attempting to study Gengar's physiology have struggled with consistency. Scans often return contradictory readings. Sometimes, Gengar registers with a solid skeletal structure. Other times, it appears hollow. Occasionally, it shows organ-like shapes within its body, while other scans show nothing but vapor. This inconsistency fuels debate among researchers. Is Gengar shifting states faster than equipment can record, or does its body exist in multiple overlapping forms simultaneously? One theory suggests that Gengar maintains a core of physical matter wrapped in layers of ghost energy, allowing it to toggle between solidity and intangibility at will. Emotion seems to trigger some of Gengar's most powerful abilities. When Gengar becomes excited, especially during battles, its grin widens dramatically, and its eyes glow brighter. In this state, its attacks become sharper and more precise, suggesting that excitement amplifies ghost-type energy. On the opposite end, when Gengar becomes protective or concerned for a trainer, its body grows darker and more stable, as though anchoring itself more firmly in the physical world. These emotional shifts demonstrate that Gengar is deeply attuned to its own feelings, channeling them into tangible power. Gengar's mega evolution is a topic of fascination for both fans and researchers. When Gengar ascends into its mega form, it sacrifices mobility in favor of overwhelming power and perception. Its body partially sinks into the ground, merging with its own shadow and anchoring itself. This anchoring seems symbolic, as if Mega Gengar chooses to become the shadow itself, rather than merely using it. The third eye that appears on its forehead is believed to perceive dimensions beyond the ordinary senses. Some theories claim Mega Gengar can see alternate timelines or the emotional signatures left by past events in a room. While these ideas lean toward the supernatural, no one can deny that Mega Gengar radiates an aura of heightened awareness. Interestingly, Gengar's playful personality doesn't disappear during Mega Evolution. Trainers note that Mega Gengar still smirks and behaves with mischief, but with a heavier tone, like a trickster spirit channeling immense power. Its voice deepens, its grin widens into something sharper, and its movements become more rigid, emphasizing its transformation into a grounded, anchoring force rather than a drifting one. Yet, the spark of humor remains, reminding everyone that even at its most powerful, Gengar is still the same prank-loving ghost at heart. In many legends, Gengar appears as a nighttime companion for travelers. People wandering alone at dusk sometimes feel a soft tap on their shoulder, followed by a faint giggle carried on the wind. Some claim Gengar guides them away from dangerous paths, using illusions to draw their attention toward safer routes. Others say Gengar appears when people are overwhelmed by fear, offering small, harmless scares that paradoxically break the tension and restore calm. These stories frame Gengar not as a menace, but as a creature that transforms fear into something manageable, almost therapeutic in its mischief. Gengar's appearance is especially striking in fog. When mist rolls through forests or city streets, Gengar's silhouette becomes blurred and ethereal, its grin glowing faintly through the haze like a lantern. Trainers who've traveled in foggy regions often describe seeing two glowing eyes hovering just above the mist line, watching them quietly. This effect has inspired countless pieces of art and folklore, painting Gengar as a guardian spirit who patrols fog-heavy areas at night. Even in the Pokémon world, where ghosts and supernatural beings are commonplace, Gengar stands out as something unique, a creature whose mysteries feel intentionally unsolved. Its behavior never fully aligns with expectations. Its abilities consistently defy strict explanation, and its personality remains a blend of humor, insight, and mischief that few Pokémon can match. It is a ghost that laughs, a shadow that thinks, a trickster that protects, a friend wrapped in mystery. As night deepens and shadows begin to stretch, Gengar emerges from its hiding places, grin glowing softly like the ember of a candle. It glides across walls, drifts beneath moonlight, and watches the world with an ancient curiosity. Sometimes it plays a prank, sometimes it offers silent comfort, and sometimes it simply watches, satisfied with the balance it brings through its playful presence. No matter where it appears, one truth always remains the same. Gengar transforms darkness from something frightening into something familiar, a space filled with mystery, mischief, and quiet, ghostly warmth. Gengar's presence has become so iconic that even people who have never owned one feel like they already understand it. That's part of the Pokémon's strange charm. It exists in the collective imagination as both a spooky ghost and a mischievous friend. Its personality is flexible enough to fit into countless stories, haunting abandoned places one moment, sharing a meaningful bond with a trainer the next. This duality has made Gengar one of the most recognizable Pokémon ever created, a symbol not just of ghosts, but of playful mystery itself. Gengar's origins in Generation 1 gave it more influence than many Pokémon introduced later. It was one of the first fully evolved ghost types, and it defined what ghostly Pokémon would be for the rest of the series. Its design was sharp, simple, and expressive, round enough to be cute, yet pointed enough to look dangerous. That balance allowed Gengar to exist across genres. It could be scary in darker stories, comedic in lighter ones, and powerful in competitive battles. Few Pokémon strike that blend so effortlessly, which is why Gengar has remained relevant for decades. Part of Gengar's cultural impact comes from how it behaves in the games. While many Pokémon simply appear on routes or in caves, Gengar usually requires intention through evolution, special events, or interactions in specific haunted locations. This makes Gengar feel earned. When players finally get one, It feels like gaining access to a secret part of the Pokemon world. That feeling attaches emotional weight to the Pokemon, shaping how people remember it long afterward. The idea that Gengar hides in darkness is more than just a narrative idea. In-game animations often depict it melting into shadows or emerging from them like a ripple. These effects, while visual choices by developers, reflect deeper aspects of Gengar's nature. It doesn't inhabit the world the same way other Pokemon do. It half exists in a space just beyond normal perception, slipping in and out as though the world were made of overlapping layers. This sense of being between worlds explains many of the mysterious behaviors associated with it. For example, trainers frequently report seeing Gengar appear in photographs even when it wasn't present during the moment the picture was taken. These photos show blurry silhouettes, faint grins, or distorted shapes that don't match the surrounding environment. Camera experts attribute this to Gengar drifting partially into the physical plane at the exact moment the shutter captures light, like a brief overlap of dimensions. In the Pokemon world, this phenomenon isn't necessarily scary. Many people find these accidental Gengar photobombs charming, like having a ghostly friend who can't resist joining in. Another aspect of Gengar's nature that fascinates researchers is its energy signature. Ghost-type Pokemon, by definition, interact with energy differently than other kinds. Gengar's internal energy readings fluctuate constantly, as though it cycles through invisible states that ordinary tools can't fully track. When Gengar becomes excited or emotional, these readings change dramatically, spiking one moment, then dropping into near zero the next. This volatility is not harmful. Rather, it reflects how dynamic ghost-type existence is. Gengar embodies motion and emotion, both of which are constantly shifting. Despite existing partly outside conventional physics, Gengar leaves a physical impact when it wants to. A Gengar's touch feels cold, not freezing, but chilling enough to make the hair on one's arms rise. Trainers sometimes describe feeling as if the shadow of a cloud passed over them indoors. This physical chill is caused by Gengar drawing warmth from objects and converting it into ghost-type energy. When Gengar uses powerful moves, the air temperature around it drops even more, adding a tactile element to its presence. Interestingly, this cold sensation seems to carry emotional undertones. People who experience Gengar's touch often describe feeling a mix of surprise and familiarity, as though being nudged by a friend who enjoys harmless pranks. The chill fades quickly, replaced by a lingering tingle. This subtle sensation is why Gengar's presence rarely feels threatening, even though it embodies concepts that might otherwise be frightening. It blends the supernatural with the oddly comforting. Gengar's sense of humor is one of its defining traits, and it expresses this humor in surprisingly thoughtful ways. If someone is nervous, Gengar might create a small illusion designed to make them laugh, a dancing shadow, a floating object wobbling like jelly, or a tiny ghostly face that pops in and out of sight. If someone is already scared, Gengar usually pulls back, softening its presence to avoid overwhelming them. Its pranks, while mischievous, rarely cross the line into cruelty unless the individual provokes or mistreats it. In those rare cases, Gengar's pranks become sharper objects flying just a bit too close, illusions becoming just a little too real. This moral nuance is what makes Gengar feel alive. It isn't good or evil, it is reactive. It mirrors the emotional energy of the space it occupies. In calm environments, it becomes curious and gentle. In tense environments, its grin sharpens as it channels nervous energy into prank-like behavior. Some trainers believe Gengar's pranks serve a functional purpose, breaking emotional tension so the atmosphere becomes more bearable. If true, This would make Gengar a surprisingly empathetic creature, one that interacts with fear not to cause harm, but to diffuse it. Theories about Gengar's origin extend far beyond traditional biology. Some researchers propose that Gengar might be the evolution of an emotional phenomenon, fear given form, through concentrated ghost-type energy. Others claim Gengar is a spirit of mischief that gained material shape over centuries of interacting with humans. A more whimsical theory suggests that every shadow in the world contains a fragment of potential Gengar, a spark of life waiting for the right moment to bloom. While none of these ideas are confirmed, their existence shows how rare and unusual Gengar's existence is. In some cultures, Gengar is considered a guardian spirit that protects against darker entities. Travelers light lanterns, carved with Gengar's grin, to ward off malevolent ghosts, believing the Pokemon's mischievous nature scares away harmful spirits. This tradition reflects something fundamental about Gengar. It embodies fear, but it doesn't create fear for the sake of harm. Instead, it turns fear into something playful, a reminder that even the darkest moments can hold fragments of lightheartedness. Gengar's interactions with dreams have long been the subject of Pokédex entries. Some claim it can slip into a sleeping person's dream and create illusions that feel vividly real. These dreams are rarely malicious. Instead, they often mirror the dreamer's subconscious emotions. A lonely person might dream of company. A stressed trainer might dream of laughter or absurd pranks. Gengar seems to amplify whatever emotions are already present, transforming dreams into exaggerated, surreal experiences. This ability suggests Gengar's powers are tied not only to physical shadows, but to psychological ones, the inner landscapes of the mind. The concept of a Pokemon that can navigate both physical and emotional spaces makes Gengar uniquely compelling. It doesn't just haunt places, it listens to them. It doesn't just scare people, it reacts to how they feel. It doesn't just appear in dreams, it reflects the dreamer's inner world back at them. This dynamic puts Gengar in a rare category of Pokemon that bridge the gap between reality and emotion, creating experiences that blur the line between fear and fascination. Certain trainers have reported that Gengar becomes particularly active during electrical storms. Lightning energizes the atmosphere, creating sharp contrasts between light and shadow that Gengar can exploit. During these storms, Gengar moves with heightened excitement, darting between flashes of lightning, manipulating shadows cast by sudden bursts of brightness. Trainers who have witnessed this describe it as a dance, a ghostly figure weaving through beams of light with delighted energy. It may be one of the few times Gengar displays its full enthusiasm openly, rather than hiding behind illusions. Gengar's connection to fear is not rooted in malice, but in curiosity. It studies the reactions of those around it, learning from the smallest shifts in emotion. A flinch, a nervous laugh, a moment of confusion. All of these responses fascinate Gengar, not because it enjoys causing pain, but because it finds emotion compelling. Fear, to Gengar, is just another form of expression. It doesn't understand fear the way humans do. It sees it as a puzzle, a sensation to explore, a feeling that says as much about a person as their laughter or their joy. That curiosity extends to the afterlife. Though Gengar is not confirmed to be a departed soul, it overlaps with the world of spirits enough to understand things most Pokemon cannot. Some believe Gengar can sense when a spirit is restless, lingering near the boundary of life and death. When this happens, Gengar may appear nearby, drifting through the area with a soft hum. Whether it helps guide the spirit onward or simply observes depends on the nature of the moment. But the frequency of these accounts suggests that Gengar plays a quiet role in the balance between the living and the dead. Above all else, Gengar is a creature defined by duality. It is playful yet eerie, material yet spectral, companion yet trickster. It makes darkness seem alive, but not threatening. It makes fear feel familiar, but not overwhelming. Gengar teaches that even shadows have personality, that what we fear is often just another part of life waiting to be understood. And when Gengar drifts through the quiet of the night, its grin glowing softly, it reminds those who see it that the unknown doesn't always have to be terrifying. Sometimes, it can be a friend wearing a mischievous smile. The more deeply one studies Gengar, the more its existence begins to resemble an elaborate puzzle held together by emotion, instinct, and ancient superstition. Its presence feels intentional, as if Gengar belongs in the quiet spaces between light and darkness, in the corners where shadows ripple like living things. This is part of why Gengar has existed comfortably in every region for generations. It adapts to human fear, curiosity, and imagination, folding itself into the emotional landscape of the world like a familiar ghostly whisper. Gengar's nature often leads scholars to wonder whether it truly perceives the world the same way other Pokémon do. Its eyes glow with a strange intensity, reflecting light even in places where illumination doesn't quite reach. Some speculate that Gengar sees not only physical shapes, but the emotional outlines that cling to people and environments. The idea is that every living being carries a faint aura of feelings, stress, excitement, sadness, laughter, and that Gengar perceives these auras the way humans see colors. If true, this would explain Gengar's uncanny ability to read people so quickly, reacting to their emotions even before they consciously express them. This emotional awareness also shapes Gengar's mischievous personality. When it senses tension, it responds with pranks to break the atmosphere. When it senses nervousness, it softens its presence. When it senses boredom, it creates small illusions to stir curiosity. In this way, Gengar acts like an emotional chameleon, adjusting its behavior to fit the energy around it. Trainers who have lived with Gengar long term often remark that it understands their moods better than some people do, appearing at the exact right moment to offer comfort or humor. Such precise emotional timing feels less like coincidence and more like intuition. In places where Gengar gather, usually old ruins, abandoned buildings, or forests with thick undergrowth, they often form loose, playful communities. These gatherings aren't structured like packs. Instead, they resemble informal meetings where Gengar interact like prank-loving spirits, sharing ideas. Observers have reported seeing groups of Gengar practicing synchronized illusions, forming spinning rings of shadow, or creating mirror-like reflections in the air. This cooperative behavior suggests that Gengar can communicate complex information, possibly through vibrations or emotional signals rather than speech. Whatever method they use, it allows them to coordinate in ways that seem almost choreographed. One strange detail noted by researchers is Gengar's habit of listening to walls. In old buildings, Gengar sometimes stops midair and drifts close to wooden beams or stone blocks, pressing its ear-like spikes against them as though hearing something hidden inside. Some believe Gengar is detecting faint echoes of past events, emotional residues trapped within the walls themselves. Others think Gengar simply enjoys the hollow reverberations within old structures, treating them like whispered stories. This strange behavior further strengthens the idea that Gengar perceives the world through a lens far broader than ordinary senses allow. Gengar's presence during nighttime travel has been noted in several regions. Wanderers who travel alone through forests or quiet streets at night sometimes feel a faint, playful energy beside them, like an invisible companion trailing along. In folklore, this is often attributed to Gengar guiding travelers away from places where true danger lies: cliffs, unstable bridges, or aggressive wild Pokémon. While Gengar rarely reveals itself directly, its companionship manifests through subtle cues. A chill when approaching the wrong path, a flicker of light drawing someone towards safety, or a shadow shifting to warn them of something hidden. Even though these stories are wrapped in superstition, the frequency of reports suggests that Gengar interacts with humans during vulnerable moments more often than documented. One of the most unusual behaviors associated with Gengar is its fascination with laughter. Trainers have noted that Gengar gravitates toward people who laugh easily, not out of malicious delight, but because laughter carries high emotional energy. Gengar enjoys the rhythm of laughter the way some Pokémon enjoy music. In fact, some Gengar synchronize their movements with laughter, bobbing up and down as though dancing to the sound. This connection may explain why Gengar enjoys comedic pranks so much it seeks reactions that generate lively emotional energy, creating an environment where it feels most alive. There are historical accounts of Gengar appearing during festivals where people wore masks and played tricks on one another. Gengar blended seamlessly into these celebrations, joining the festivities like a ghostly reveler. Witnesses described seeing glowing eyes and a floating grin weaving through the crowds, performing illusions that made lanterns flicker or shadows elongate dramatically. These stories are so prevalent that some regions incorporated Gengar motifs into festival imagery. In certain towns, lanterns carved with Gengar's grin are displayed to invite playful spirits and ward off more malicious ones. Gengar's involvement in folklore extends into dreams as well. Stories claim that Gengar can slip into the subconscious of sleeping humans, not to frighten them, but to explore their inner landscapes. These dreams often take on distorted yet whimsical qualities: floating objects, surreal colors, shifting rooms, and playful illusions that defy physics. Dreamers frequently describe feeling watched, but not in a sinister way, more like a curious presence observing quietly from the corner of their vision. While these accounts are anecdotal, they mirror Gengar's behavior in the waking world: curious, mischievous, and deeply attuned to emotional energy. The dream realm may also explain why some people wake to find their room colder after particularly vivid dreams. Gengar may be drawn to intense emotional states, appearing nearby to observe or interact. The temperature drop is subtle but noticeable, a faint chill lingering long after the dream fades. Far from being frightening, many describe this sensation as comforting, like waking to the memory of a friendly presence. One fascinating aspect of Gengar's biology is its ability to manipulate depth. In environments with heavy shadows, Gengar can flatten itself into a two-dimensional shape, drifting across walls or floors like living ink. But in brighter areas, it can suddenly expand, forming a three-dimensional shape that bursts forth from its own shadow. This ability makes Gengar one of the most fluid Pokémon in existence, shifting between dimensions in ways few others can. These behaviors make it nearly impossible to track or trap, as it can always vanish into the thinnest sliver of shade. Studies of Gengar's internal structure reveal something even stranger. Its body doesn't behave like normal matter. Instead, it appears to consist of something between a gas and a plasma ghost energy condensed into a semi-physical form. It holds shape because it chooses to, not because it must. When relaxed, Gengar's surface becomes hazy and flickering, like a heat mirage. When focused, it becomes solid enough to push objects or even support a trainer's weight for a brief moment. This dynamic body structure may explain how it phases through walls. Gengar simply disperses its molecules across a thin layer, slipping through microscopic gaps before reforming on the other side. Emotion influences this ability strongly. When startled or excited, Gengar momentarily loses some cohesion, causing its body to ripple or distort. When calm or protective, it becomes denser and more defined. Trainers who bond deeply with Gengar often describe moments where the ghost becomes unexpectedly tangible, leaning against their arm or settling beside them with a gentle weight. These rare moments feel significant, as though Gengar is expressing affection in the only physical way it can. In competitive battles, Gengar's ability to manipulate space makes it unpredictable. It can flicker between distances, confusing opponents by appearing closer or farther than expected. Some describe it as warping, though technically it's more like rapid phasing combined with illusion. Moves like Shadow Punch take full advantage of this, allowing Gengar to strike from angles that seem impossible. This mobility, paired with its intelligence, is why Gengar has consistently remained a formidable presence in nearly every generation of battles. Gengar's Mega Evolution further expands this mastery over shadows. By rooting itself into the ground, Mega Gengar becomes an anchor point between dimensions, drawing ghost energy into itself like a vortex. Its grin widens, its third eye opens, and its perception expands dramatically. Some trainers believe Mega Gengar can sense emotions from great distances, picking up on disturbances across entire cities. The idea of a ghost that watches over massive populations may seem unsettling, but Mega Gengar rarely acts on this awareness unless necessary. Its expanded consciousness simply allows it to observe more than before. One of the more heartwarming aspects of Gengar's nature appears during storms. While lightning and thunder frighten many Pokémon, Gengar becomes strangely serene. It drifts to high rooftops, letting rain pass through its semi-solid form while it watches the sky erupt with light. Storms create deep shadows and flashing illumination conditions that sharpen Gengar's senses and make the world feel alive in ways normal weather doesn't. Trainers have described seeing Gengar perched on ledges during storms, its grin glowing faintly, as though it's savoring the chaotic beauty of the moment. Above all, Gengar remains a Pokémon defined not by its ghostliness, but by its personality. It embodies the playful side of the unknown, the part of mystery that sparks curiosity rather than dread. When Gengar slips through a room, it leaves behind a trail of cold laughter, quiet mischief, and gentle tension turned into something almost comforting. It teaches people to look at shadows not as threats, but as companions, because in the world of Pokémon, even the darkest corners can hold a grin that means no harm, just a ghost who enjoys the art of playful mystery. Gengar's legacy stretches across generations, not just because of its power or design, but because of how deeply it resonates with the idea of companionship in the shadows. It's one of the few Pokémon that can be frightening and comforting at the same time. This paradox is exactly what draws so many trainers toward it. Gengar represents the unknown in a way that feels approachable, a ghost that doesn't sever connections but shapes them. Its presence often lingers quietly at the edges of a room, a cold breeze against the skin that feels less like a warning and more like a greeting. One of Gengar's most iconic traits is the way it reveals itself. It rarely appears suddenly without reason. More often, Gengar lets others notice it, a soft flicker in the corner of the eye, a shifting shadow that doesn't quite match the light, a quiet laugh where nothing visible stands. When trainers turn, Gengar often hovers just close enough to be seen, its grin glowing faintly as though amused by the human instinct to look over one's shoulder. This method of revealing itself reflects Gengar's core nature. It wants to be seen, but only when the moment feels right, only when curiosity outweighs fear. The idea that Gengar plays a role in helping people navigate the unknown persists across multiple regions. In certain folklore, Gengar acts as a night guide, a spirit that watches over travelers who find themselves lost after sundown. These stories tell of a faint purple glow appearing along forest paths or old bridges, leading wanderers toward safer areas. While these accounts are wrapped in myth, they align closely with the countless testimonies of people who swear a warm sense of presence helped them through difficult nighttime journeys. Whether Gengar intends to protect or simply enjoys accompanying travelers remains a mystery, but the result is the same comfort where one expects fear. Gengar's fascination with shadows also leads to behavior that borders on artistic. It sometimes shapes shadows on walls into playful figures, twisting them into exaggerated silhouettes that mimic living creatures. Trainers who have witnessed this describe seeing outlines of dancing ghosts, swirling spirals, or shifting shapes that look like puppets playing out silent stories. This resembles a form of ghostly art, an expression of creativity that uses darkness as a canvas. Gengar seems to enjoy performing these shows, especially when someone is feeling anxious, as if trying to replace fear with wonder. One unusual characteristic of Gengar is its affinity for small, enclosed spaces. While it can move freely through walls and ceilings, it prefers to rest in tight corners, inside hollow objects, or within the shadows cast by furniture. This preference may stem from instinctual behavior. Shadows are deepest where objects block the most light, giving Gengar richer spaces to hide in or manipulate. In homes where trainers live with Gengar, it often resides behind bookshelves, beneath beds, or inside wardrobes. These hiding places aren't chosen to scare people. Rather, they feel like comfortable dens where Gengar can relax, observe, or plan its next playful trick. Another intriguing aspect is Gengar's relationship with sound. Despite being able to move silently, Gengar sometimes imitates quiet noises. Footsteps, tapping, distant whispers, or gentle knocking. These sounds are usually subtle, designed to evoke curiosity rather than fear. When Gengar is excited, the sounds become more energetic, rapid tapping, echoed laughter, or gentle humming. These auditory illusions reveal Gengar's playful intelligence. It uses sound not to deceive maliciously, but to communicate or draw attention. Trainers who bond with Gengar often learn to interpret these noises as expressions of emotion rather than tricks. Gengar also displays an unusual fondness for certain objects. While it cannot carry heavy items in a traditional sense, it can manipulate small objects by creating brief pockets of solid form within its shadow. Many trainers report Gengar showing interest in shiny trinkets, marbles, soft fabrics, and objects that reflect light. It sometimes drags these items into its hiding spaces, arranging them into small collections. These collections don't seem to serve any purpose other than amusement. Gengar simply enjoys the textures and shapes, much like a person might arrange decorations in a favorite room. In the wild, Gengar's interactions with the environment often create eerie yet beautiful scenes. During misty mornings, it drifts low to the ground, its body partially blending with the fog. This creates an illusion of a face or a grin floating through the mist, giving rise to ghost stories told in small towns. In forests, Gengar sometimes causes leaves to swirl around it in spirals, using ghost energy to manipulate wind currents. In caves, it moves silently across stalactites and stalagmites, blending with shadows in ways that make it seem like the cave itself is watching. These behaviors reinforce its connection to atmospheric shifts, treating the environment as an extension of its own ghostly essence. What separates Gengar from many ghost types is its sense of fairness. While it enjoys pranks, it rarely inflicts harm intentionally. If a prank goes too far, Gengar often withdraws, sensing distress in those it startled. It may even leave small gestures of apology, gentle nudges, playful allusions, or a temporary warm spot on the floor where it lingered. Some trainers recount moments where Gengar appeared guilty after scaring someone too much. its grin fading slightly as it drifted back into the shadows. These behaviors suggest Gengar possesses a strong moral compass shaped not by human rules, but by empathy and instinct. Gengar's emotional intelligence extends to Pokémon as well. It often befriends species like Mimikyu, Banette, and Sableye, forming ghostly cliques that roam abandoned places together. These groups communicate through flickers of movement, shared illusions, and synchronized drifting. Gengar tends to take a lead role in such gatherings, guiding other ghosts with a blend of playfulness and authority. This leadership isn't forceful, it's more like the charismatic center of a friend group, encouraging others to join in the mischief while keeping things balanced. Observations of these gatherings reveal a surprisingly social structure among ghost types, with Gengar at the heart of many interactions. The way Gengar processes fear is another topic of fascination. Humans fear the unknown, darkness, silence, or sudden movement, but Gengar finds these things exciting. Fear itself is a form of emotional energy, and Gengar understands it as deeply as a musician understands rhythm. When someone is afraid, Gengar doesn't see weakness. It sees potential, a chance to transform fear into something lighter. This is why many of its pranks feel oddly gentle. It nudges, teases, and surprises, but rarely crosses into true terror unless provoked. Gengar uses fear as a language, communicating through moments that toe the line between playfulness and tension. In some regions, people believe Gengar brings good fortune when seen at night. This belief arose from stories of travelers who encountered Gengar during difficult journeys, only for things to improve shortly afterward. Whether coincidence or not, the legend stuck. A fleeting glimpse of Gengar's grin is seen as a sign that unseen help is nearby, that even in the darkest moments, something watches over you. This idea transforms Gengar from a symbol of fear into one of protection, especially among those who walk home late from work or travel alone at night. Gengar's bond with dreams appears again in stories of children who claimed a strange, friendly presence helped them sleep. These children often reported dreaming of floating through rooms, watching shadows twist into playful shapes. When they awoke, they felt an unusual calmness, as though a weight had been lifted. Parents sometimes dismissed these accounts as imagination, but in households where Gengar lived, the stories occurred too frequently to ignore. It's as if Gengar watched over the sleeping children, not haunting them, but comforting them through the quiet hours of the night. One of the most charming aspects of Gengar happens when it grows extremely fond of someone. Trainers have recounted moments where Gengar curls around their legs like a cold mist, gently nudging them for attention. Others describe Gengar resting behind them, using its own shadow as a cloak that envelops the trainer in a soft, chilly glow. These gestures represent affection in the ghostly language, closeness without weight, presence without intrusion. A Gengar that trusts deeply becomes a lifelong companion, loyal in ways few ghostly beings ever choose to be. Gengar's strange connection to time adds another layer to its mystique. While it doesn't manipulate time directly, it often appears at moments emotionally charged enough to feel timeless: a person grieving alone, a child afraid of the dark, a traveler lost between towns. Gengar appears in these moments not out of obligation, but out of curiosity, drawn by the emotional resonance. Some believe Gengar helps carry emotional burdens by turning them into moments of intrigue rather than sorrow. Whether or not that's true, the idea speaks to the powerful emotional symbolism Gengar holds. Ultimately, what makes Gengar so beloved is the way it redefines what a ghost can be. It isn't a lingering spirit of tragedy or a creature bound by darkness. It is an entity that thrives on emotion, connection, curiosity, and humor. It lives in shadows not because it hides, but because shadows are playful, flexible, and full of possibility. When Gengar drifts through the night, its grin glowing softly, it carries with it the message that darkness can hold comfort, mystery can hold warmth, and even ghosts can be friends. Gengar's connection to shadows runs deeper than simple camouflage. Shadows are living landscapes to it, flowing spaces full of depth and subtle color that most eyes cannot perceive. To humans, a shadow is a flat absence of light, a patch of darkness painted across a surface. To Gengar, shadows pulse with pockets of energy, shifting temperatures, and faint emotional imprints left behind by those who pass through them. This is why Gengar moves through the dark with such natural grace. It navigates shadows the way water types navigate currents. Many researchers believe Gengar can sense the age of a shadow. New shadows, created by shifting light or passing movement, feel thin to Gengar, like ripples on water. Old shadows, lingering in still places, feel heavier and richer, containing echoes of the environment's emotional history. Gengar prefers these older shadows, slipping into them like a favorite chair. In abandoned homes, it sometimes returns to the same shadow every day, settling into it as a resting space. This behavior confuses people who assume ghosts wander aimlessly. In reality, Gengar's patterns are deliberate, rooted in its unique perception of shadow life. This perception extends to objects as well. Gengar often interacts with items that cast interesting shadows, such as lanterns, plants, statues, or pieces of furniture. It will sometimes tilt objects subtly to change how the shadow stretches across the floor, watching the shape warp and curl as though it were alive. Trainers who own Gengar often wake to find small objects shifted slightly, not stolen, not damaged, just rotated or moved in ways that alter the flow of shadows in the room. This may be Gengar's way of decorating its environment, shaping the darkness around it to match its aesthetic preferences. Another element that fascinates scientists is the temperature phenomenon surrounding Gengar. The cold air that accompanies it isn't random. Gengar actively regulates this chill. When it wants to remain unnoticed, it lowers the temperature gradually so humans acclimate without sensing a sudden change. When it wants attention, the temperature drops sharply, creating that familiar shiver through the spine. And when it wants to express comfort in its own ghostly way, the cold becomes gentler, more like the coolness of night air rather than the bite of winter. This modulation suggests that Gengar's thermal influence is both intentional and emotional, not merely a biological quirk. The idea that Gengar understands warmth surprisingly well comes from trainer accounts. Some report moments when Gengar sits beside them after a long day, only slightly lowering the room's temperature instead of its usual sharp chill. This softer cold feels refreshing, soothing, as if Gengar recognizes when a person needs calm rather than playfulness. In this sense, the cold becomes Gengar's version of a warm hug, a paradoxical but meaningful gesture of comfort. Certain towns have traditions centered around this sensation. In regions where ghost folklore is strong, people believe that a gentle nighttime chill is a sign that benevolent spirits are watching over them. Children are told that if they feel a brief cold breeze while alone in their room, a friendly ghost, often depicted as Gengar, is passing by to check on them. While these stories may not be scientifically accurate, they show how Gengar has become woven into cultural understandings of protection, emotion, and the supernatural. Gengar's ability to blend humor with eeriness makes it one of the most complex Pokémon in existence. On one hand, it enjoys startling people, slipping into shadows to grin at unsuspecting passers-by. On the other hand, it's deeply perceptive, adjusting its behavior based on each person's emotions. Trainers have noted that Gengar becomes gentler around children, drifting more slowly and keeping its pranks harmless. Around overly serious adults, Gengar becomes more mischievous, as if trying to break through their rigid emotional walls. And around those who are sad or lonely, it grows calm, hovering nearby in silence, its presence steady and grounding. One remarkable thing about Gengar is its curiosity about human habits. It often observes people brushing their hair, sorting items, folding clothes, or writing in notebooks. The behavior mirrors a wild Pokémon watching humans cook or build tools, a mixture of confusion and fascination. But Gengar adds a twist. It occasionally imitates these behaviors using shadows, making dark outlines of hands mimic movements on the wall. Trainers sometimes look up to see the silhouette of a hand brushing phantom hair or writing with a ghostly pen, even though no one is there. It's as though Gengar tries to understand human actions by creating shadow versions of them. The supernatural side of Gengar extends to its interactions with light. While it thrives in darkness, it has a surprising affinity for small lights, candles, lanterns, flickering bulbs. These weak light sources create soft shadows that Gengar enjoys sculpting. Trainers who read by candlelight have reported Gengar shaping the flame's shadow into playful figures that dance across the wall. Some Gengar even nudge candles gently to shift the shadow's direction. This behavior has roots in folklore, where Gengar was said to whisper to lantern flames, causing them to flicker and reveal hidden truths. Though the truth may simply be that Gengar enjoys the interplay of light and dark. The myth has endured because it fits so well with Gengar's personality. There is also the curious phenomenon of Gengar time distortion. Though Gengar doesn't manipulate time itself, people frequently report losing track of time when Gengar is around. This might be due to Gengar's mesmerizing movements, which can pull focus away from the world. It may also stem from Gengar's presence in dim environments, where lighting shifts create the illusion of slower or faster passage. Some trainers fall asleep faster in rooms where Gengar lingers, describing a gentle fogginess that settles around them like emotional sedation. This calming effect is subtle, only noticeable when someone reflects on how quickly time slipped by. Gengar's love for illusions stretches far beyond battle. When it feels playful, it creates small visual tricks, faint glowing shapes drifting like fireflies, floating orbs that pulse softly, or silhouettes of creatures that don't exist. These illusions are usually whimsical rather than horrifying, designed to amuse rather than frighten. Children who grow up with Gengar often view these illusions as magical spectacles, describing them as tiny ghost lanterns or dancing lights. This reveals an important truth. Gengar's pranks are shaped not by intent to scare, but by the desire to amuse and connect. In certain abandoned areas, Gengar has been observed forming temporary illusions of former inhabitants. A rocking chair might sway gently, a teapot lid may lift slightly, or faint laughter may echo through empty halls. These illusions aren't meant to deceive. They seem more like homage, echoes of what once existed. Gengar doesn't fully recreate the past, it merely hints at it, painting emotional impressions rather than literal scenes. This behavior suggests that Gengar experiences the world at the intersection of memory and reality, perceiving not just what is present, but the emotional residue of what was. One of the more heartwarming legends about Gengar involves stories of lonely ghosts. In some regions, people tell of spirits who wander aimlessly because they cannot find rest. According to these tales, Gengar sometimes adopts these spirits, guiding them gently through the shadowed world until they find clarity. Whether true or symbolic, this idea reflects how people view Gengar not as a tormentor of spirits, but as a mediator between worlds, a playful ghost who understands sorrow deeply enough to offer companionship to those who need it. Even its grin carries emotional depth. At first glance, it looks mischievous, sly, perhaps even teasing. But when trainers spend enough time with Gengar, they learn to recognize different variations. A wide grin means amusement. A small, curled grin means curiosity. A more relaxed grin signals contentment. And in rare cases, when Gengar is worried or protective, its grin fades slightly, replaced by a soft, almost neutral expression. These subtle shifts prove that Gengar's smile is more than an intimidating feature, it is a language of its own. During thunderstorms, Gengar becomes spectacularly active. Lightning gives the world sharp contrasts, creating sudden flickers of bright light followed by deep, rich shadows. Gengar rides these contrasts like waves, darting between flashes with precise timing. Some trainers swear Gengar can predict lightning down to the exact moment, moving just before each strike. Others claim Gengar absorbs static electricity into its body, causing faint sparks to dance around its spikes. While evidence is limited, there is little doubt that storms awaken a joyful, wild side of Gengar. Yet despite these bursts of playfulness, Gengar is also one of the most patient Pokémon. It can sit silently for hours, watching humans or other Pokémon with steady curiosity. It waits for the right moment to act, whether that moment is a prank, a comforting gesture, or simply drifting closer to observe something new. This patience often catches people off guard. They expect restless mischief, but instead find a ghost who understands the flow of time better than many living creatures. At its core, Gengar embodies the idea that fear and laughter are closer than people think. Its presence transforms the unknown into something familiar, the dark into something playful. When Gengar flits through a quiet room, its grin glowing softly, it turns tension into curiosity and silence into company. It reminds people that even the deepest shadows can hold warmth, humor, and gentle companionship. Gengar is not just a ghost, it is a bridge between fear and comfort, a reminder that the night holds secrets that aren't meant to scare, but to fascinate. Gengar's bond with shadows makes it one of the most adaptable Pokémon in any environment, especially in places where darkness and light constantly shift. In cities filled with neon signs and flickering streetlights, Gengar darts between the changing patterns of illumination like a phantom performer. It uses reflections in windows, metallic surfaces, and puddles of rainwater as pathways, slipping from one patch of distorted light to another. Trainers who spot Gengar in these environments often describe seeing a wide grin flash across a building's glass before disappearing again, leaving them unsure whether it was real or just a trick of the light. In rural areas, Gengar behaves differently. With fewer artificial lights and more natural shadows, it moves slowly, calmly, sometimes drifting between tree trunks or blending into the soft steps of moonlight on dirt paths. Farmers have shared stories of seeing Gengar perched atop barn roofs during quiet nights, watching over their land with an unreadable expression. These sightings usually come with reports of livestock remaining unusually calm, as though Gengar's presence soothes rather than disturbs them. The contrast between Gengar's urban and rural behavior reveals a surprising adaptability, a ghost that thrives in both chaos and stillness. One of the most intriguing observations about Gengar is how it reacts to strong emotions. When someone nearby feels intense joy, fear, sadness, or excitement, Gengar's body flickers more brightly, as though absorbing or reacting to the emotional energy. Some researchers believe Gengar feeds on emotional resonance, not in a literal sense, but as a form of sensory stimulus. Emotions give the ghost world texture, depth, and movement, And Gengar engages with these emotional signatures the way an artist engages with color. High energy draws it closer. Calm energy draws it into a more relaxed, floating state. Emotionally neutral environments, empty rooms, undecorated hallways, or sterile buildings seem to make Gengar restless. It may tap on walls, create illusions, or drift around objects as though trying to wake up the space. Trainers who live with Gengar sometimes notice it become more active in freshly cleaned rooms, creating small shadows on the walls as though reintroducing personality into the space. This reveals how deeply Gengar relies on emotion and atmosphere to feel grounded. Without emotional energy to interact with, it seeks stimulation through mischief and exploration. One of Gengar's most mysterious interactions occurs with mirrors. Mirrors reflect both light and shadows, making them a natural point of fascination for a Pokémon so connected to the interplay between the two. Gengar often appears behind people in mirrors before revealing itself in the room, using the reflection as a playful introduction. In rare cases, Gengar takes this further by creating illusions within the mirror, showing shapes or faces that aren't visible in the physical world. These illusions aren't harmful. They're more like Gengar's version of waving hello. Still, the experience can be startling for those not expecting it. Gengar's relationship with children is particularly unique. Children are more open to the supernatural, more willing to accept strange events without fear. Because of this, Gengar often appears more frequently around children, drawn by their curiosity and vibrant emotions. Parents sometimes report their children laughing in empty rooms, claiming that their shadow friend is playing with them. These stories might unsettle adults, but the children themselves rarely seem afraid. In their innocence, they interpret Gengar's actions as friendly rather than eerie, creating a bond with the ghost that feels natural to them. There are even cultural tales that frame Gengar as a childhood guardian spirit. In certain regions, parents leave small toys or treats near windows during stormy nights, telling their children that Gengar will take away nightmares in exchange for the gift. Whether Gengar actually interacts with these offerings is unknown, but the tradition persists because so many children report sleeping peacefully afterward. For ghost-type researchers, these stories highlight how Gengar's reputation shifts depending on age, frightening to the unprepared, comforting to the imaginative. Gengar's social behavior extends into relationships with other Pokémon as well. It often befriends mischievous or emotionally expressive species, forming bonds based on shared curiosity. Pokémon like Aipom, Sableye, Mismagius, and Mimikyu frequently appear alongside Gengar, creating groups that behave like small bands of tricksters. These groups sometimes explore abandoned buildings together, each contributing a different type of mischief, illusions, floating objects, eerie sounds, or distorted shadows. Gengar often leads these groups, guiding the rhythm of the play with its innate sense of humor. Despite its love of tricks, Gengar rarely uses its abilities to cause long-term fear. Its pranks serve as moments of emotional disruption, brief sparks that create laughter, tension, or surprise. After the moment passes, Gengar often drifts away quietly, leaving behind no trace except the memory of its grin. This separates Gengar from more malevolent, ghostly Pokémon, which may thrive on prolonged fear or negativity. Gengar, instead, treats fear like a toy, something to poke at, transform, and turn into something harmless. Fear is not sustenance for Gengar, it is inspiration. When Gengar feels deep affection for its trainer, its behavior becomes considerably more tender. It floats close enough to cast its shadow over them, gently brushing against their skin like a cool breeze. It may mimic their posture, resting in a shadow that perfectly matches the trainer's silhouette. It might even stay awake at night, drifting near their bed to watch over them. These actions speak to a ghostly form of loyalty, a commitment that transcends physical constraints. Gengar protects those it loves not through brute force, but through presence, playfulness, and emotional connection. Gengar's internal structure remains one of the most perplexing biological mysteries in the Pokemon world. Advanced scanning equipment reveals shifting densities within its body, as though it contains swirling pockets of gas, plasma, and energy. This structure isn't chaotic, though it appears to be organized in response to Gengar's emotional state. When excited, Gengar's internal energy brightens and stabilizes. When relaxed, it becomes diffuse and misty. When threatened, it sharpens, forming patterns that resemble glowing veins of ghost-type power. This malleability explains how Gengar can withstand impacts, pass through objects, or create illusions using parts of its own body. Its ability to slip between solid and intangible states also connects to this shifting physiology. When Gengar phases, it disperses its molecules into a thin network of ghost energy, traveling through cracks or openings too small for physical matter. When it reforms, the molecules condense back into a semi-solid, maintaining the familiar round body shape. The speed of this transformation makes it appear instantaneous to the naked eye, reinforcing the idea that Gengar exists in two worlds at once, always half here, half somewhere else. Trainers who spend years with Gengar often describe a deeper bond developing, one that feels more psychic than physical. They instinctively know where Gengar is, even when it's hidden. They sense emotional shifts in the room that correspond to Gengar's presence. Some claim to hear faint laughter or quiet humming even when Gengar is not visible. These experiences suggest that Gengar may extend its consciousness beyond its physical form, creating a subtle psychic imprint on those it trusts. Whether this is a natural ghost-type trait or a unique ability of Gengar remains a subject of debate. One of the most mystical aspects of Gengar is its interaction with forgotten memories. People exploring childhood homes or old neighborhoods sometimes see Gengar drifting through familiar spaces, as though drawn to memories evaporating from the walls. In dusty attics, under abandoned playgrounds, or within shuttered shops, Gengar sometimes recreates faint illusions of things that once were a child's laughter, a flickering toy, a shadow of movement that feels familiar. These illusions aren't perfect replicas, but echoes of emotional impressions, suggesting that Gengar perceives memories embedded in environments much like fossils in rock. In regions with strong ghost culture, Gengar holds a revered place. Statues depict it as a smiling guardian. Lanterns shaped like its face glow during nighttime festivals, and old poems describe it as the laughter in the dark that walks beside the lonely. This representation reveals how Gengar has become more than a Pokemon. It has become a symbol of mystery embraced rather than feared. Its grin embodies courage in the presence of the unknown, and its shadow represents companionship in solitude. Even in modern cities with bright lights and constant noise, Gengar finds its place. It appears in subway tunnels as a flicker of purple before the train arrives, or in the corners of late-night cafes where people work quietly into the early morning hours. In these places, Gengar acts like an unseen companion to those working late nights, a presence that keeps solitude from becoming isolation. Its faint chill becomes a reminder that someone or something is sharing the space, even when the city feels empty. Gengar's power at Mega Evolution heightens these supernatural qualities dramatically. Its third eye opens fully, glowing like a beacon of ghost energy. This eye is believed to perceive dimensions the physical eyes cannot: emotional currents, spiritual presence, and perhaps even glimpses of alternate spaces. Trainers who experience Mega Gengar often describe an overwhelming sense of awareness, as though the world around them has gained new layers. The ground feels deeper, shadows feel thicker, and even silence seems to vibrate with energy. Yet Mega Gengar remains calm within this heightened state, controlling its immense power with focus and precision. By the end of a long night, when the world is still and quiet, Gengar often retreats into the deepest shadow it can find, melting into it like a returning echo. Its glowing grin fades first, followed by its eyes, and then its body softens into a ripple that dissolves into darkness. This moment captures the essence of Gengar, present one moment, gone the next, leaving behind only a memory of laughter, mystery, and a gentle chill. But for those who know it well, Gengar never truly disappears. It lingers, watching, waiting, ready to emerge again when the moment feels right. As night stretches across the world and shadows deepen into the quiet hours, Gengar becomes most active, slipping through the softened edges of darkness with the ease of a creature entirely at home within it. These moments reveal something essential about its nature. While many associate ghosts with gloom or sorrow, Gengar embodies a different aspect of the supernatural: curiosity, playfulness, and the quiet companionship found in the spaces others overlook. It moves like a whisper between moonlight and shadow, a presence that feels both ancient and familiar. Gengar's relationship with the nighttime environment goes far beyond simple camouflage. It responds to night the way a plant responds to sunlight. Darkness is not just a condition around Gengar, it is a medium through which it expresses itself more fully. The world becomes softer, sounds become clearer, and shadows stretch into inviting pathways that Gengar drifts through like streams of air. In these hours, its grin seems brighter, its body more fluid, and its movements more expressive. In urban areas, Gengar navigates rooftops, chimneys, alleys, and high vantage points, observing the world below with a steady, almost protective demeanor. People walking home late at night sometimes describe the faint sensation of being followed, not with fear, but with a strange comfort, as if something unseen is quietly watching over them until they reach safety. Occasionally, a pair of glowing eyes or a small flicker of purple light appears from an unreachable rooftop before vanishing again. These brief encounters remind people that Gengar's presence at night is often more guardian than threat. In forests, Gengar moves among fireflies and drifting mist, weaving its shape through branches like liquid shadow. Fog carries emotions more strongly than open air, and Gengar seems to use it as a canvas. When a traveler wanders through the trees alone, Gengar might appear just long enough to guide them to a path, or simply to observe with its glowing grin shining through the haze. Though naturally a prankster, Gengar rarely disrupts the tranquility of nighttime woods. Instead, it glides in harmony with the environment, adding a faint whisper of the supernatural to the already mysterious forest air. One of Gengar's most remarkable traits is its ability to mimic. This isn't limited to simple noises or shadows. Gengar can reproduce entire moods. If someone is sad, Gengar may appear soft and slow-moving, drifting gently in the background. If someone is excited, Gengar mirrors that energy, darting and swirling more quickly. This emotional mimicry may be a natural adaptation, allowing Gengar to connect with living beings whose emotions influence the atmosphere. By reflecting a person's mood, Gengar often helps soothe or amplify emotions in subtle, meaningful ways. Researchers studying ghost-type behavior believe Gengar's mimicry acts as a form of empathy, even if expressed in a mysterious or mischievous manner. Gengar senses emotional texture, reacting to it instinctively. When someone is anxious, their emotions tighten the air, and Gengar responds with illusions designed to break tension. When someone is lonely, their emotions create pockets of empty space around them, and Gengar fills that emptiness with its presence. This makes Gengar one of the most emotionally perceptive Pokemon in the world, using its abilities not just for pranks, but for connection. One of the oldest stories about Gengar involves a tradition practiced in remote towns where ghost sightings are common. According to local folklore, families leave small lanterns outside their doors on windy nights. These lanterns are carved with a wide, sharp grin meant to resemble Gengar's face. The idea is that Gengar, seeing a familiar expression, will watch over the household and ward off spirits with crueler intentions. Children in these towns grow up believing that Gengar is a guardian of the threshold between light and dark, a protector of those who accept its presence without fear. This belief is reinforced by accounts of trainers who have raised Gengar from a ghastly. These trainers often describe the evolution from Haunter to Gengar as a moment of emotional deepening, while Ghastly is curious and playful in a floating, drifting manner, and Haunter is mischievous with a sharper edge. Gengar stabilizes into something more grounded. Its pranks become more thoughtful, its companionship more deliberate. It no longer floats aimlessly. It chooses where to be. It no longer scares for the sake of fright. It scares for the sake of connection. This change suggests that evolution brings emotional maturity, giving Gengar a fuller sense of identity. Gengar's fascination with dreams continues to intrigue researchers. Though not every Gengar interacts with dreams, those that do seem to treat the dream world like an endless playground. Trainers who share their sleep near Gengar often describe dreams filled with floating colors, exaggerated shadows, and surreal landscapes. These dreams rarely contain fear. Instead, they resemble whimsical, ghostly adventures. Some trainers even note waking up with less stress after a night near Gengar, as though the Pokemon reshaped their nightmares into something gentler. While the exact nature of this influence remains unknown, the consistency of these experiences suggests Gengar has a calming effect on emotional dreams. This comfort through mystery approach defines Gengar's entire existence. It doesn't comfort in the traditional sense, with warmth or softness. Instead, it comforts through presence, through showing that the unknown can be a companion, not an enemy. When someone sits alone in a quiet room at night, Gengar might slip into the shadows beside them, not to frighten them, but to keep them company. Its cold air becomes a subtle reminder that even silence has life in it. Gengar's illusions also play a role in how it interacts with the world. These illusions aren't always meant to deceive. Sometimes they are meant to entertain. Some trainers report Gengar creating harmless shapes on the wall while they read a book, shifting silhouettes of small dancing ghosts or swirling patterns of purple light. These illusions are often simple, playful, a ghost's version of drawing. In larger spaces, Gengar sometimes expands its illusions into full-wall shadow murals that distort into mesmerizing patterns. People who witness these displays describe them as calming, hypnotic, and strangely beautiful. One peculiar habit Gengar displays is its love of hiding in objects, not just beneath furniture or behind curtains, but inside items like wardrobes, crates, empty vases, or abandoned appliances. This behavior stems from its desire to blend into environments where shadows sit most densely. Trainers who live with Gengar sometimes discover it inside storage boxes or closets, its grin glowing faintly from within before it drifts out with a soft laugh. These hiding spots may serve as personal retreats, spaces where Gengar can rest, watch, or plan its next moment of mischief. While Gengar's pranks often steal the spotlight, its quieter moments reveal surprising depth. There are times when Gengar simply sits with a trainer in stillness, its body humming faintly, casting a cool shadow that wraps around the person like a ghostly blanket. During emotionally heavy moments, Gengar rarely plays tricks. Instead, it listens not with ears, but with perception. It senses tension, sorrow, or uncertainty, and stays close in silence. Trainers who experience these moments often say Gengar feels like a presence that acknowledges their emotions without judgment. This ghost does not mock vulnerability, it sits within it, transforming fear into comfort simply by being there. This emotional intelligence extends even further when Gengar interacts with Pokémon who have experienced fear or trauma. Ghost types often gather where emotional scars linger, and Gengar appears to play a stabilizing role within these groups. It encourages other ghosts to express themselves through harmless illusions rather than aggressive behavior. It redirects negative energy into playfulness. It even steps between conflicts within ghost-type gatherings, using its charisma to restore balance. These behaviors suggest that Gengar acts as a kind of emotional anchor among its spectral kin, guiding their chaotic tendencies into more constructive expressions. Gengar's connection to architecture is another overlooked detail. Old castles, abandoned towers, forgotten houses, and shuttered shops all attract Gengar more readily than open plains or new buildings. These environments contain emotional weight, history, stories, laughter, sorrow, arguments, memories embedded in the walls like ghostly fingerprints. Gengar senses these emotional layers and treats them with an odd reverence. When drifting through old hallways, Gengar moves slowly, almost thoughtfully, as though reading the emotional residue left behind. It doesn't disturb these places, it inhabits them quietly, becoming part of the story they hold. At times, Gengar appears in public places where people gather emotionally: theaters, parks, playgrounds, or midnight festivals. While humans may not see it, Gengar often watches crowds from shadowy corners, its grin glowing with delight as it absorbs the atmosphere. These lively environments energize Gengar, inspiring it to create small illusions that add extra magic to the moment. A flickering shape behind a dim lamp, a shadow that dances along with musicians, or a brief purple glow beneath a bench. These touches are subtle enough to be dismissed as imagination, but meaningful enough to leave a trace of wonder. One of the most enduring mysteries of Gengar is how it chooses people. Some trainers encounter countless ghost types before ever meeting a Gengar. Others meet Gengar without seeking it, often during emotionally significant moments. People who form bonds with Gengar share a common trait: they accept mystery. They are curious rather than fearful, comfortable with things that cannot be fully explained. Gengar gravitates toward individuals who treat shadows not as threats, but as companions who look at the unknown with interest instead of dread. These trainers become lifelong partners with a Pokémon that exists in a world only it fully understands. When Gengar finally rests after a long night, its retreat into darkness feels almost ceremonial. It melts into a shadow slowly, letting its grin linger for a final moment before fading completely. The air warms slightly as it disappears, as though returning the cold it borrowed from the room. And then the space becomes quiet, still, peaceful, touched lightly by the memory of a ghost who watched, played, protected, and connected in its own mysterious way. Gengar's legacy endures because it embodies the heart of ghost-type Pokémon, the blend of the eerie and the endearing, the unknown and the familiar. It reveals that the supernatural doesn't have to be frightening, that shadows can be gentle, and that even the strangest creatures can offer warmth. Gengar reminds people that darkness is not empty. It is full of stories, memories, and companions unseen. And in the quiet of night, when the world grows still, Gengar becomes the silent guardian of those who sleep beneath its watchful, mischievous grin,